Welcome to the latest from Iguacu, your trusted source for effective overseas giving. Thank you for joining us. I'm Catherine Davies, CEO and founder of Iguacu, and I'll shortly be joined by senior researchers from the Iguacu team, so please feel free to post a question. We'll be covering many different crises today, but you can ask your question about any of the charities you recommend or anything to do with effective overseas giving. Before we're joined by the research team, just a quick word about an issue that's come to light. There seems to have been a drop-off in overseas giving in the United Kingdom, and we'll be writing about that in the coming weeks. It's in response to a scandal that has arisen in the United Kingdom with regards to certain NGOs working in humanitarian response. And there has been launched an thorough investigation into those incidents, which of course is extremely important. At the very least, in the response to humanitarian crises, we seek to do no harm, and it's a great crime when we hear about these kinds of incidences with regards to safeguarding practices. But just we wish to reassure the audience that at Iguacu, safeguarding practices is one aspect of the many considerations we look into thoroughly at Iguacu in our months-long investigations into the serious crises around the world to determine genuinely effective charities working on the ground. So if you're feeling or you're hesitating about giving overseas, you can be rest assured that you can give with confidence through Iguacu. And we really strongly believe that the people in the greatest need on this planet, there really should not be a drop in support to these people because of the crimes of a few. And we really urge people to continue their support. And we'll be watching those investigations very clearly, because not only must they get to the bottom of what's gone wrong, but it's so important that that learning is widely shared throughout the sector as a consequence of those investigations. Anyway, first to join us from the research desk today is Adib Chowdhury, and Adib monitors natural disasters for Iguacu, and he also reviews our disaster response and resilience around the world. And I believe he has a very interesting story to share with you about what's happening in Bangladesh on resilience. And Bangladesh is one of the most affected countries in the world by natural disasters. Hi, Adib, how are you?
Hi, Catherine. I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Very good. Is my connection okay? Are you able to see me?
Yes. Am I okay?
Yep, very clear.
Perfect.
So, Bangladesh.
Yes, absolutely. So, Bangladesh is one of the countries that are worst affected by flooding, and it's expected to be one of the worst countries affected by the increased levels of sea levels from climate change. Mm-hmm. And so over the past few years, it's experimented with various flood defense projects. And recently, it tried a new method, which was suggested by a US geologist whose name is Stephen Goodbread. And what he suggested was quite clever in the sense that it uses an old idea and adapts it to the modern world. And what his idea was, it's this method of controlled flooding. And how this has been done is by Bangladeshi farmers in the southwest of Bangladesh, cutting slits into the flood banks as a method of controlling the flooding. So they control how much water goes into the field. And this was developed in China many years back as a way to distribute water from one floodplain to another. And in this way, you're actually working with nature rather than against it. So you're not making any dams or anything. And so farmers in the southwest of Bangladesh have been using this for the past couple of years. And recently, what they found is that land levels, how high the land is, has increased in some places over 1 meter, which is excellent for protecting against flood. Mm-hmm. And Bangladesh's current defense, this is much needed because Bangladesh's current defense it's not enough. Back in 2009, Cyclone Ayla struck Bangladesh and it killed, unfortunately, over 150 people. And it caused $270 million worth of damage to structural properties and defense mechanisms that Bangladesh had invested in. And so this new method could provide a solution to tackling Bangladesh's seasonal flooding problem.
That's great. That's potentially very important for Bangladesh. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Until next week, Adib.
No problem. Thank you very much. Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Thanks for joining us. The research desk is Natanea. Shiraki, and Nathaniel is our lead researcher for the Middle East. Here we are. Nat, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Very good, thank you. So, Syria, what's important to know right now?
So I want to give you an overview of where the country is standing right now, a week after this attack on Aleppo and the fall of the last besieged area held by the opposition in Syria and the suspected use of chemical weapons. The needs are huge, but there are things to be done about it. There are ways to help effectively on the ground. 80% of the Syrian population currently is in need of humanitarian assistance. 80%, so this is a huge number. On displacement, you have 700,000 people that have been displaced from their home since the beginning of the year. So this is only coming on top of the already 6.5 million people, half of the population nearly, that has been displaced since the beginning of the conflict, and the 5.6 million refugees that are outside of the country, so mainly in neighboring countries. In the northwest of the country, in the region of Idlib, which is the last stronghold of the opposition, you have 400,000 newly displaced people, women, men, children, that are hosted in improvised, overcrowded collective shelters. We're talking about unfinished buildings, tents, schools, mosques, where the lack of privacy obviously means protection risk, especially for women. Elsewhere in the country, the level of violence continues to be extreme. For instance, the attacks on health facilities this year, over the first 3 months of the year, are twice the rate of 2017. So the needs are absolutely significant and are not decreasing. But there are things you can do thanks to the thousands of tireless aid workers that are working on the ground. Our recommended charity, SAMS, the Syrian American Medical Society, are on the front line of humanitarian aid in Syria. They have just expanded their activities to be able to reach civilians in both Idlib and Aleppo. And on top of that, they are still caring for the evacuees from Eastern Ghouta and trying to reach them all so they can have access to the immediate healthcare they need.
Great. So SAMS, once again, SAMS is a charity recommended on the Iguacu platform after a months-long investigation of the various different NGOs responding in Syria. It's highly regarded by the expert network at Iguacu. It takes seconds to donate to SAMS, and it's a wonderful way to support the Syrian people. Thank you for that, Nat. And I believe you have some news on Iraq this week.
Yes, better news on Iraq, which is in a state where there's a possibility for it to recover after the end of the territorial presence of the Islamic State organization. So you may remember Mosul, this city that was the so-called capital of the Islamic State in Iraq. There was a huge battle there. It was left devastated back in September last year. Well, reconstruction has started there, and in particular 3 major bridges have now been repaired, benefiting over 1 million Iraqi people, because it's restoring the contact between the 2 parts of the city. So Mosul is divided by a river, like many big cities. It's helping improving the local economy. It's creating opportunities. It's restoring the contact between Mosul and the rest of the country, and also it's good for the restoration of social ties and interactions, which the recovering country crucially needs. Now, the local authorities and international partners are now trying to tackle the problem of the massive war debris left in the city. As you can imagine, the level of violence was so extreme that you have war debris everywhere that are threatening the life of people, causing health issues and environmental issues, and obviously hindering the reconstruction process. So one of the very innovative ideas that are being thought through right now is to try and recycle part of this debris, and this would have the double benefit of creating livelihood and economic opportunities, which the country urgently needs right now.
Well, I have I just checked to see if there is any questions here from our audience. Please, we encourage you to ask any questions that you might have. But before you go, I have a cheeky one for you, Nat. Very cheeky. I have given him no warning. So you know, at Iguacu, we don't decide to cover a serious humanitarian crisis and then cover it forever. You know, one of the happiest days at Iguacu is when we stop covering a crisis, because it's no longer of the severity that it would be something that we consider at Iguacu. And we have stopped covering crises in the past because the situation on the ground has improved to the extent that it's no longer a serious humanitarian crisis. And so it is an exit celebration at Iguacu. So my very cheeky question for you, I know it's very early days and the humanitarian need in Iraq is huge. But I wonder if you've got any thoughts to share about the future with regards to Iraq no longer being covered by Iguacu. I know it's very cheeky.
Well, as you said, Iraq is still very much an acute crisis. You have 8.1 million people in need of humanitarian help.
Okay.
So that's far from being the end of the humanitarian crisis in Iraq.
Park that.
And obviously it's less in the news right now because, you know, Islamic State is no longer there, or very, very lowly. So there's no, so to speak, big villain that can concentrate media attention.
Yes.
So it's not as easy to raise awareness about Iraq as before, but it does need a lot of help. But it's also true that they have a real chance to get back on their feet right now, but they will need a lot of help for this, and we have to be present for them.
And that was your sense, as I recall, talking to the network recently. Nat constantly, all of our lead researchers are constantly speaking to our network on the ground, and the sense that they were sharing was that actually it's really important that international focus continues to be focused on Iraq, because it's such a critical moment. There's so much to be done, and if the support falls away, the fragility of the situation can mean that we suddenly have a resurgence of violence, and that was not too long ago. So my question was very cheeky, and that's a very high order of magnitude. But I look forward to that day.
Very good question.
That day, celebrating with the Iraqi people that they're no longer in a serious crisis. But until then, thank you for that update, Nat.
Thanks, Catherine.
Until next week.
Till next week.
Bye for now. So next to join us on the research desk here is Blondine Sindimier, and Blondine is our lead researcher for Central Africa, and I believe she has an update for us on South Sudan, and she'll be joining us very shortly, and I believe we're almost there. Yes. Fabulous. Hello, Blondine.
Hi, Catherine. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. And this week you have some news for us from South Sudan, I believe.
Yes, and actually I have a good news. I'm pleased to report that 7 aid workers from the national NGO South Sudan Health Association, abducted in March in the south of the country, were released safely on Sunday.
Fantastic.
South Sudan. Yes, exactly. And we can be very happy about that news, especially because last week 2 others in the north of the country were killed. Actually, South Sudan, though aid workers are working to save lives in South Sudan, where 7 million people are in need of humanitarian help to survive, they have been the target of armed groups' violence. Actually, 2017 was the deadliest year for aid workers since conflict began in 2013. There were over 1,100 reports of attacks against humanitarian organizations, and 30 aid workers were killed.
Yes, and just the end there, the audio cut off, but I think our all of that, which was really pointing to the dangers for aid workers in South Sudan. And we'll have some news on South Sudan. I think next week we'll be able to reveal to you our new recommendation, magnificent charity that the experts have been recommending in South Sudan. We're very pleased to be able to share that with you imminently, but that'll be next week. And
yes, so stay tuned.
Yes, indeed. And on Central Africa, Blondine. Central Africa.
Top United Nations and African Union officials went on a joint visit to the Central African Republic to express their solidarity with the people of CAR and show their commitment to foster peace in the country. They met with the president and with religious leaders. Following their visit, they called for the international community to continue to support the African Initiative for Peace in the Central African Republic, an initiative launched last summer to find a peaceful solution to the protracted. Our visit came as tensions were flaring up in the capital, Bangui. On Tuesday, clashes between UN forces and armed groups in the capital killed 30 civilians and 1 peacekeeper. And as we speak, tensions remain very high throughout the country.
Thank you, Blondine, for that. There was a little bit of a fractious quality to the audio, but I think all of it came through. So thank you for that, and until next week.
Thank you, Catherine. See you next week.
Thank you. Bye for now. Next to join us from the research team is Kirsty Aventurin, and I'll get through now onto the Facebook Live. And Kirsty has an update for us on the Rohingya crisis, and the Myanmar government has been under a lot of pressure from the international community. And I'll just see if we can get Kirsty to join and share with you. While I'm doing that, I put on a bit of light here. It seems to be very dark. There we go, that's a little better. And we should be joined shortly by Kirsty. It seems to be taking a little while to add Kirsty. And I can start. I actually have Kirsty's notes here. I can start her briefing to keep. Oh no, here we are. It says it's. Yes, success. Hello.
Hi, Catherine. How are you?
Very good, thank you. I was just explaining that the Myanmar government's been under a lot of pressure from the international community with regards to the Rohingya crisis, and I believe you have some news about ways in which they're showing they are trying to respond, and I'll let you share that with our audience.
Yes. So yes, as you said, the Myanmar government has been under a lot of pressure from the international community, and it seems that they're even trying to show signs that they're responding to some degree on various fronts, despite ongoing concerns over the fate of Rohingya inside Rakhine states. Recently, the Myanmar government sentenced 7 soldiers for the killing of 10 Rohingya villagers. The discovery of the mass grave had made the headlines last year after 2 Reuters journalists had been arrested while they were investigating the crimes. They are still facing up to 14 years imprisonment for allegedly possessing secret documents. A UN Security Council mission is also meant to be visiting the affected areas for the first time at the end of this month. Also, last week, a Myanmar government official visited for the first time a Rohingya refugee camp for the first time since the military crackdown, which started 8 months ago. The government official said that he was quite certain that the repatriation process would start very soon, but the UN and the Bangladeshi government continue to be highly concerned over the lack of human rights and unsafe conditions for Rohingya inside Rakhine states. Also, just this Sunday, the Myanmar government has repatriated for the first time a family back to Rakhine states, but this operation happened without the supervision of the UN or the Bangladeshi government.
Okay, so quite a few signals, but not a lot more than signals at this point. And no doubt you'll have more to say next week on what's actually really happening in terms of a meaningful response. So thank you very much for that update. That's great. And did you have any news this week about Haiti?
Yes, so about Haiti, and about immigration flows. The government of Chile recently announced that from now on, Haitians wanting to travel from Haiti to Chile would need a visa before getting on board from Haiti. Mm-hmm. Now, the measure, which advocacy groups have said is discriminatory, comes as no surprise because the number of Haitians making their way to Chile has exploded in the last year. The destination Chile seems to be very attractive for Haitians in search of better opportunities. More than 100,000 Haitians have made their way to Haiti, and that is more than 100% increase in comparison to the previous year. Also, there seems to be a surge of Haitians traveling on makeshift boats to the US and to neighboring islands. This month, 700 Haitians were intercepted at sea in comparison to only 68 last year at the same time. So with 60% of the Haitian population still living in poverty, Haitians continue to resort to perilous journeys.
Thank you, Kirsty. Thanks for that update. And until next week.
Until next week.
Thanks, Kirsty.
Bye.
Bye for now. Thank you very much for joining us and wishing you a great week. Bye for now.